And we are back. Welcome to another great episode of Liam Picks Fights. My name is Liam. I pick fights. I am excited to be here today. We don't have the greatest card in the world, but we've got a fight card, and that's enough for me. We've got UFC Vegas 31, headlined by Islam Makhachev and Thiago Moises. This is a lightweight matchup that I'm actually pretty excited for, and a lot of people are down on this matchup. You know, they think it's kind of a step back for Islam, and I think that this is an appropriate step forward in a lot of ways for Islam. You know, Drew Dober, an excellent banger, but he sort of has a offensive skill set on the feet that wins him a lot of fights. He doesn't have a well-rounded skill set necessarily that you would need to contend with someone like Islam Makhachev. And on the other side here, we have Thiago Moises, who I find is probably going to pose some interesting challenges. I think he has, good striking on the feet. That's been improving. Obviously, he got tuned up like a guitar by Michael Johnson. We all saw that. But I also think that Thiago Moises looked very impressive in that Alexander Hernandez fight. Got to shine my own shoes. I bet him as a plus 199, 1.5 units in that spot. I thought that Alexander Hernandez was being overvalued by the market. And, I thought that turned out to be a pretty clear decision win for Thiago Moises. So I think that Thiago has some upside in this division, but I also think that Islam Makhachev, he might be the ticket right now. And I think that the line reflects that. There's probably no value whatsoever to be had on the Islam money line. I know a lot of people are throwing that in parlays. I don't want to even do something like that. I don't think that I'm extracting enough value at that price. But I also don't think I'm going to be running to the window to bet on Thiago Moises this weekend. I think that plus 450, an interesting number, but not enough to get me involved. If that touched plus 500, plus 550 on the money line, maybe I'd throw down a half a unit or less on my boy Thiago Moises, because I do think that he's being a little undervalued here. He's got submission skills of his own. Islam Makhachev, submission specialist, but is he going to be able to submit a Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu black belt the quality of Thiago Moises, who was able to pull guard and like insta-sub Michael Johnson with that straight ankle lock, and who was able to get up routinely in the Beneil Dariush fight despite the fact that he was losing? I think that Beneil Dariush doesn't get enough credit for his grappling skill. Thiago Moises, there's no shame in losing that Beneil fight the way he did. He's the younger guy. He's a developing prospect, and I think he probably learned a lot from that fight. I think he's got his work cut out for him here, but I do think people are writing him off a little early. Thiago Moises has a lot of future in this division, in my opinion, and he's developing every time we see him. We haven't seen stagnation. We've seen improvement steadily. And I think that the guy who steps in the octagon this Saturday is going to be the absolute best version of Thiago Moises. So I'm really excited to see what he has to offer in this matchup. Now, moving down the card, I'm going to make sure that this is a quicker breakdown today because we don't have as many fights, and there's also not as many fights that I took action on, right? The main event, I broke it down a little bit, but I don't have any action on the main event currently. I thought about playing that under 4.5 rounds at plus money. I kind of like that spot, hoping a little bit more money comes in on the over. I'm not sure that Islam Makhachev, I think that there's a pretty decent chance that he could. And I also think that Thiago Moises, he probably doesn't have the most realistic minute-winning path here to get a decision victory. I think that he is most likely going to rely on a finish in order to find his win condition here. I think that, he has power well enough on the feet, nothing exceptional, but has power certainly. And I also think that his submission ability perhaps is underrated in this spot. So he's going to be relying on a finish to get the win. But I think that the under 4.5 at plus money, there may be some value to extract there. I know a lot of people are playing Islam props. That's probably the way to look if you're going to be betting on Islam. But like I said, right now I don't have any action. Check back at Liam Picks Fights on Twitter and Instagram. I will try and announce any action that I add, if I do add between now and fight time, but I don't really anticipate doing so on the main event. Marion Renault and Miesha Tate. I got locked into a Miesha Tate bet very early. Minus 118 on the money line, 1.23 units. that I bet there. And listen, I'm not saying that that's a sharp bet. I'm not saying it's going to look smart. And frankly, if I had it all to do over again, perhaps I wouldn't have taken it. But what I was thinking was fade a 44-year-old fireman, and who's been on a big losing streak. Now, Miesha Tate, been away from the sport for 5 years. And that's why I say maybe not the sharpest bet I've ever made. But I do think that Miesha Tate, she represents a lot of athletes that get burnt out. And I think part of her saying, I don't have it anymore, was the fact that she was probably burnt out from the sport. She had just been in the limelight as a champion. Then she loses her championship belt in emphatic fashion. She finds herself back against the wall. A lot of people lose that first fight back after they just lost a title. A lot of champions return and lose their next fight. And so I think Miesha experienced the same thing. She experienced it a lot younger than other people doing the sport. And so she walked away at a young age and is now coming back at, a relatively young age, 34 years of age. And I think that the age gap is significant. It's not as significant in women's MMA as men's MMA. Offer. Granted, she's not the most technical fighter in the world. I think that we have, some reason to believe that could have improved over the course of her absence. However, without evidence of it in the cage, I'm going to say that I have a Miesha Tate ticket. I have thought long and hard about hedging my way out of that a little bit by putting, a quarter unit on Marion Renault inside the distance. I think that Marion Renault at 44 years of age is probably going to suffer in the cardiovascular department. And I also believe that she's going to be looking for an early aggressive finish. I think she's going to try and take the fight to Miesha and overwhelm her because Misha's been away for a while. So we'll have to see how the fight plays out. But Marion Renault inside the distance at plus 400, I don't think that that's necessarily a bad bet. And I also think that if you're playing the Marion Renault side, you probably have the value side. But I think that it might play out kind of a greasy fight, a little low level, and Miesha might be able to take this fight down the stretch as the cardio of 44-year-olds tends to fade no matter how hard they train. And we'll see. We'll see how it plays out. We got Mateusz Gamrot and Jeremy Stephens. This is an interesting fight to me. I think that Jeremy Stephens, all credit and respect to him. He's a warrior. He's been fighting in the UFC for a very long time. And, I respect Jeremy Stephens' body of work. I've been watching. I remember distinctly when he threw that flying knee and knocked out Dennis Bermudez, one of the prides of Section 9 wrestling. Unfortunate for me as a Section 9 wrestler. I was rooting for Dennis Bermudez that night, but I had to give credit and respect. Jeremy Stephens, absolute monster, a lot of finishing ability. But I think he also has a little bit of an overinflated, knockout reputation. I think that Jeremy Stephens is a talented guy, but I think especially down the stretch here, he's been fighting a lot of tough guys, absorbing a lot of heavy head strikes. And that was a really vicious knockout in his last fight against Calvin Kattar. I don't think he had an elbow. He was bleeding profusely, really bad visual. And, Jeremy Stephens is just on a downward trend in his career. On the other side, we got Mateusz Gamrot. I lost a lot of money with that Guram Kutateladze decision. I had him in a couple parlays. And Gamrot, that is. And, I thought Gamrot won that fight, but I thought it was close. I think that it played out a little closer. But Guram, after the fight, is saying, no, he won that fight. And I think that that's worth something. The competitors, the athletes, if they're being honest and say the other guy won after the fact, I'll take that for something. But I also think that this is a tricky enough matchup for him. Jeremy Stephens, big hitter, got to navigate a fight with somebody like Jeremy Stephens. But I think that Mateusz Gamrot has all the skills to do that. I think he's got the coaching and the discipline to do that. American Top Team. He looks like he's in absolutely phenomenal shape. I expect him to be the bigger athlete And I think that Mateusz Gamrot probably just has more tools to win this fight. I think he could take it to the ground. I think that he could point strike and out volume somebody like Jeremy Stephens. I'm not sure how many people were expecting him to knock out Scott Hot Sauce Holtzman in his last fight, and he dispatched of him. Pretty beautiful punching. So I got to say, I think Mateusz Gamrot is legit. I don't know that I would pay the money line price. I talked about before this, money lines weren't really how I was going to target this card, primarily because I think there's a lot of volatility, and I think a lot of these betting lines are pretty accurate, and I'm trying to get a current price on this fight. Minus 220 right now from betonline.ag for Mateusz Gamrot. Yeah, that's probably too much for me to pay. We've got Ronnie Pickering says Islam wins. I agree with you, brother. I think that is the most likely outcome for sure. I think Islam, probably clears minus 350, minus 400 here, but I think minus 750, it's at a point where I don't feel like I could extract value. I don't blame you at all targeting that fight in any way. We also we can get Gamrot inside the distance at what price? Gamrot inside the distance plus 165. Yeah, that doesn't do it for me either. So I think that if you're going to target Gamrot in that fight, it's probably going to be a parlay or pass. Jeremy Stephens at plus 185. I'm not saying that it's a great bet, but I think that if you like the Jeremy Stephens side, the money line is not a bad look. Jeremy Stephens by knockout is plus 400. Yeah, I don't think that there's a tremendous amount of value there. But to each their own. If Jeremy Stephens comes out and flatlines him, I'm going to look silly. But I'm going to mostly sit back and watch and enjoy that fight. If anything, if the Gamrot line drops down under minus 200, I would consider those two boys the best of luck. But I think Mateusz Gamrot is going to get it done, so that would be my pick in that fight. We've got Rodolfo Vieira and Dustin Stolfus. Listen, I've heard a lot about Dustin Stolfus saying in interviews that, he's closed the gap on, whatever deficiencies he had and some health things, the lingering effects of COVID-19. And listen, I understand that, and I can see how it's affected other athletes over the course of their UFC tenure, so even somebody like Jeff Neal, not COVID related, but just the lingering effects of a bad health outcome affecting their performance in the octagon, making them not necessarily look like the same fighters that we're used to expecting. However, Dustin Stolfus, I watched him on the Contender Series. It was a little unimpressive to me, if I'm on a pretty routine mat return. So he was pursuing a high crotch takedown, and he landed in what was, a pretty typical mat return-esque position in wrestling. And Pfeiffer just had his arm extended at a weird angle, ended up breaking it pretty horrifically, honestly. So that was unfortunate to see, but I wasn't altogether impressed by Stolfus in that fight. And then in his fight with Kyle Dawkins, he was getting dominated in the clinch for the most part. He was getting outstruck at distance, and he was getting taken down and controlled for various portions. So I think that those are all red flags against somebody like Rodolfo Vieira. However, we also have to be cognizant of the fact that Rodolfo Vieira's cardio has been a bit of a red flag and a bit of a concern in the UFC. We saw it as early as the fight with, I'm blanking on the gentleman's name, but I watched the fight this morning, Oscar Pichota, who is a black belt. Rodolfo was able to get him down several times, but also was unable to get him down on several attempts, was shucked away, and appeared to be tiring pretty significantly. However, he relentlessly pursued the takedown and the finish in that second round in order to bail himself out, and his top pressure was just too much for Pichota, who is a black belt. So I think that Adolfo Vieira, the black belt killer, the black belt hunter. This is a very serious talent, and his jiu-jitsu is world class. I think that Dustin Stolfus is a little too willing to be in guard. He's a little too willing to look for reversals and sweeps, and I think that it could cost him against somebody like Adolfo Vieira. Now, if he's a smart guy, he's going to go all out trying to defend every takedown and not allow somebody like Adolfo Vieira to spend any time controlling him from top position. But given what we've seen from him in 2 fights, two guys who are like, bottom rung UFC level, maybe in terms of his last 2 opponents, and Dawkins has more upside, obviously. But I think that his lack of takedown defense is going to cost him here. I think that his willingness to play from guard could cost him here. And I think Adolfo Vieira is the more physical athlete, the more imposing athlete, and is looking to make a statement return in this fight after, probably getting really embarrassed, frankly, in his last fight when he got submitted by Anthony Hernandez. So I think that Adolfo Vieira is probably going to storm back. I think he's around minus 200 or so on the money line. Probably wouldn't touch that, but I think that you could potentially extract some value on that under 1.5 at even money. I think that's probably a better way to target it if you like the Adolfo Vieira side. Conversely, you can get Adolfo Vieira by submission, minus 110, inside the distance, minus 125. I would definitely take the inside the distance if you're playing Adolfo Vieira instead of submission. He has 2 knockouts to his name. You always want to be cognizant of something like that. So if it's a couple cents difference, let's just make it simple and opt for the more clear path to victory. Now, we also have next up on the card, we have sorry, I'm getting a spam call on my cellular device, which should have been silenced. So we have next up on the card a 170-pound fight. Or excuse me, no, we've got 145-pound fight. This is one I do have action on and one that I really like taping. You guys can understand why. These are exciting fighters. We got Mowgli Benitez, right? Gabriel Benitez, and we have on the other side everybody's favorite fighter, it seems, Billy Quarantillo. And Billy Q, very fun guy to watch. Always in somebody's face, always trying to make it a dogfight. There's a tremendous amount of volume. However, I thought that in his last fight, we saw some very exploitable weaknesses from Billy Q. Number one, he runs himself into the clinch consistently and gives up takedowns from that position. Number two, I saw that Billy Q is hittable in these stand-up exchanges, very much so in the early going of a fight. And Gabriel Benitez hits very hard. And I think that he has 3 knockdowns credited to his name, 2 submissions credited to his name in the UFC. So this is a guy who has finishing potential both ways. And I think that Mowgli has a lot of skills that will challenge somebody like Billy Q. You know, I heard somebody describe it this week. I want to say that it was Dan Levy, that Billy Q has a style for eating up regional level guys. I think that that's true. You know, if you could just put a tremendous amount of pace and pressure on somebody, most people will break and quit. And I don't think that most people can match his cardio. However, I think that we've seen Mowgli Benitez go 15 hard minutes more than once in the UFC. I think that he has the ability to do so. I think that he could potentially really hurt and finish Billy Q. But Billy Q is also tough as an old leather boot. So I feel like we could see an absolute beatdown for the first 2 rounds and maybe a hope spot, a comeback look for Billy Q in the 3rd round, but I don't think that he will finish Mowgli Benitez. I don't know that he has enough power to do so. You know, Billy Q by submission, I think would probably be his best path, but I don't know that I see that. I think that Mowgli is going to be able to stuff a lot of these takedowns. I think that Mowgli is probably going to put a hurting on him on the feet. My concern as a Mowgli backer here, and the reason I didn't go a full unit, I went, I believe, 0.8 units or 0.85 units. I'll have to check. But I went at minus 170, kind of missed a little bit of the line movement. I was hoping that the public was going to keep betting Billy Q, but it seems like a bunch of sharp action came back the other way and has kept that Mowgli line minus 170 and above. So I will maybe add if we get Mowgli Benitez minus 155 or under that. But right now I'm going to hold out less than 1 unit on Mowgli Benitez, but I expect him to put a beatdown on Billy Q. I think that Billy Q is a fun fighter. I think he's a tough guy. I think the UFC should keep him around whether he wins or loses his fight. But I do think that this is a really tough matchup for him. I think that Mowgli has very good body attacks. Billy has a big body, a lot of target area. And I just think that it's going to be a tricky matchup for him to navigate, especially the way he's willing to absorb damage and absorb strikes in the first and second round of fights in order to push the pace in the third. And that style works for a while, but I think the better and better striker you face, the less likely it is that that style is going to be effective for you. But we'll have to wait and see. That's why we put him in the cage and why fights aren't on paper. Next up, we got Daniel Rodriguez and Preston Parsons. And I can be perfectly frank with you guys. I have not seen Preston Parsons fight, so I don't have a strong opinion on this. I want to see some Preston Parsons footage before I stake a claim one way or the other. What I will say is that Daniel Rodriguez let me down against Nicholas Dalby. I actually thought he won that fight. I thought the judges got that one wrong. But at the favorite price we were paying for Daniel Rodriguez that night, made me really uncomfortable with betting him. But I also have to say, I think Daniel Rodriguez is a very skilled fighter. I think that his striking metrics are phenomenal. And I think that if he's able to avoid prolonged wrestling exchanges on the ground, that he should probably be pretty safe in this spot. I haven't seen enough of his grappling to be confident in his abilities from those positions. His get-up game seems pretty good, but in extended grappling exchanges, I hear that's what Preston Parsons is looking for. And based on his record, I think he's got a lot of submission wins to his name. So I'd be interested to see the tape on Preston Parsons before I offer an opinion one way or the other. But we've got Daniel Rodriguez as a pretty sizable favorite. So you're paying the price for Daniel Rodriguez this weekend if you want to play him. And the under is set at 1.5 rounds in that fight, which I don't necessarily love playing in a matchup like that at welterweight. So I will go ahead and pass on that fight. But if I end up taking action, like I said, you can always find all my action on Twitter at Liam Picks Fights. And I normally post it to Instagram as well, Liam Picks Fights. So we can move right along. Amanda Lemos and Montserrat Ruiz. I don't know that I ended up tracking the play, but I ended up playing Montserrat Ruiz right before the Cheyenne Bays fight because I was watching the Cheyenne Bays footage and going, man, why is she such a significant favorite? And I can't believe it, but that head and arm throw has been making a huge difference in WMMA fights for some time, as long as I've been watching as a fan. Now, I think that the head and arm choke works at a certain level. The head and arm throw, I should say, excuse me. The head and arm choke works just fine. But the head and arm throw in high-level MMA works at a certain level. But I think that, Amanda Lemos, given what we know about her strength and physicality as a former bantamweight, I don't think that she is going to get exploited in that way. I think that she could probably take the back if she ends up in that position. And I think that she should be winning the striking exchanges pretty easily and pretty soundly on the feet. I think Montserrat Ruiz is very tough. So I think that she might take a beating for the full, 5 minutes for the first round. But I do think Amanda Lemos somewhere along the way should find a finish in this spot. I think she has very good power in WMMA. I think that she is a very good striker. And I think that her, her time is now. I don't think that Montserrat Ruiz has much of a future in the division, but do I think she could pick off lower level contenders if they give them to her? Sure. I just don't think that that's what she has tonight. I think she's being set up to lose. I think that Amanda Lemos is being put in a very good prospect position, and I expect her fully to, dominate this fight. And I expect her to finish probably inside of 2 rounds. So that's my feelings on that fight. I won't belabor the point there, though. She's a minus 600 favorite for a reason. I think the market would agree with my take largely. Khalid Taha and Sergey Morozov. Another fight that I would have liked to do a little more tape on. Taha, I believe, is coming back off of the USADA suspension, and that for me is always a red flag. I don't like to see that. Obviously, you had the war with Hani Barcelos, who just dropped another war, close split decision there to Valiev, and so we got Hani Barcelos, talented guy, but altogether beat the heck out of him. It was like not that close a fight. Taha was staying in there and taking shots, but I think that Hani Barcelos proved his point and won a pretty clear-cut victory there. And so Taha, he's kind of had a mixed bag in the UFC. Had the very fast win over Boston Salmon, 25 seconds with punches. Lost to the not altogether that impressive Nad Narimani. And that's that. He had the no contest arm triangle choke with Bruno Silva. So, man, I don't really know what to make of Khalid Taha at this point. Morozov seems to me perhaps a little slow-footed, but altogether not a bad fighter by any means, and kind of had a really rough entrance point to the UFC in that Umar Nurmagomedov fight. So I expect Morozov to have a better fight here. Don't have action either way in this fight, but I'm excited for it. I think it's going to be a fun one, and I'm expecting fireworks. I will conservatively take Sergey Morozov, but again, my official picks will come out on Twitter, so don't hold me to that if I change my mind between now and fight time. Anderson Dos Santos, Miles Johns. This was a fight that I really dove into, really tried to go deep on the tape because I was trying to understand the dynamics of this matchup. And the first thing I want to point out off the top, a lot of people are talking about the knockout from Miles Johns in his last fight. And what I'm not hearing a lot of people talking about is the fact that he was pretty blatantly cheating. And I'm not trying to be a jerk. I'm not a fighter. I don't step in that cage right now. So I can't, take anything away from a guy who does. But what I will say is Miles Johns, if you rewatch that tape, looks like he pretty clearly has his hands in his opponent's glove. So he's holding the hand that the opponent would block with and then throws an uppercut real hard with that other hand. And, really unfortunate because Kevin Natividad, his opponent that night, would go on to get knocked out again in the first round of his next fight. So, unfortunate turn of events for Kevin Natividad, very fortunate turn of events for Miles Johns that the referee didn't see it, or if he did see it, he didn't say anything. So I think that Miles Johns kind of got away with one a little bit in his last fight. But that being said, he was absolutely piecing up Kevin Natividad and winning that fight. But I thought that he was the higher level fighter, way higher pedigree, and should have won that fight. And I bet that the odds would have reflected that as well. So I think that we've got a guy in Miles Johns who's a good fighter. But I also think that Anderson Dos Santos is an opportunistic finisher, and he's kind of a dog fighter. He's a gritty guy, been put through a lot of damage, a lot of hell in his short UFC run, but has walked through a lot of it and continued fighting and really ended up pushing guys that are probably better fighters than him because he had heart and effort and some durability and some, slick finishing opportunities. For example, in the Nad Narimani fight, had a very serious guillotine attempt, locked in, and Nad Narimani was forced to bail to his back and scramble back up to his feet from his own takedown attempt, right? So Anderson Dos Santos is going to be meeting Miles Johns wrestling reactions with jiu-jitsu reactions, and I do think that makes for an interesting style clash, especially as you see the line continue to widen. But we also have a lot of factors that play for Miles Johns, right? We've got an age advantage, a pretty significant one. However, we've got Miles Johns with a very short reach, right? 66 inches. Anderson Dos Santos on the other side, he's actually going to have a reach advantage in this fight. He's been at a severe reach disadvantage or reach parity in all his other UFC fights. So now we get to see Anderson Dos Santos actually with a reach advantage, and he's going to be throwing hooking shots. He's going to stay in the pocket and keep throwing. That's kind of what he does, for better or for worse. Does that mean he could get knocked out in this spot? Oh, yeah, he could definitely get knocked out in this spot. because Miles Johns seems to have a pretty good amount of natural power, and he's going to intercept with a jab. That's what we can rely on Miles Johns to do. However, we also know that Miles Johns doesn't really like being pressured that much, and he will, oftentimes react with a double. However, he can't really get much control from it. So he spends energy and doesn't really accomplish very much with the energy expenditure. And so that's what concerns me for Miles Johns here. I think he's the more talented fighter. I think he's more well-schooled. But I also think that he does not have more grit and he does not have more toughness. And I think that Anderson Dos Santos, he might just have finishing upside on the feet and on the ground. And so right now I haven't tracked it. I'm still considering tracking it and maybe adding a little more. I have about a quarter unit, I should say, on Anderson Dos Santos inside the distance at plus 380. And I also think that Miles Johns is probably going to win the fight. I think that the minutes of this fight will and should be won by Miles Johns. But I also think that a third round collapse for Miles Johns is not out of the question. I think if Miles Johns is getting hit hard by Anderson Dos Santos because he's not able to establish a jabbing reach advantage and instead is trying to establish the jab while hooks are still hitting him in the face, I think that we could see a Miles Johns, mental checkout. I think Miles Johns has to be constantly kept on track by his coaches. Saif Sayoud's yelling at him, always giving very steady instruction from the corner and in the corner, trying to refocus Miles. So I think that, Anderson Dos Santos is a tough matchup for Miles Johns. I think Miles Johns could look very, clear-cut favorite here if he sticks behind a jab, if he's disciplined in his approach, if he sticks and moves, and if he keeps this at striking range for the most part and uses his wrestling skills to maybe push Anderson Dos Santos into the cage and wear him down a little bit. I think that might be a good idea for Miles Johns. What I don't think would be a great idea is blasting off reactive takedowns every 2 seconds, unless he's confident he can get some control time from top and unless he's worked on that. Because I've seen a bunch of fights where Miles Johns, attempts a ton of takedowns and doesn't get credited with any of them, even though he picks people up, slams them. It looks really cool, but then nothing happens and the guy gets right back up to his feet. He kind of does the double leg, let him go, and then let him stand back up as he throws punches. And that seems to me like a waste of energy more than anything. Now, granted, it does make your opponent think about the threat of wrestling, probably opens up your striking attempts a little bit more. But I also think that if you're going to shoot the takedown, get the bang for your buck, hold the guy down for as long as you can and really put some pressure on him, try and throw a couple strikes from the top position and hold it rather than just abandoning the position to throw a few wild punches as somebody returns to their feet. I think it's going to be a fun scrap. I think that the money line right now doesn't interest me very much. If you guys have action on any, Gabriel Benitez just dropped to minus 155 on the money line, guys. You know what that means. Quarter unit adding right now. Bing, bang, boom. All right. We did it. We got him. All right, boys. So now we have a full unit. We have a full unit on Gabriel Benitez, which I am very happy about, at minus 155. So, all right. We will move right along. My final prediction is I will say, I'm going to go with Miles Johns for the age advantage. But I'm also going to say it. Anderson Dos Santos has some finishing upside. And if that ticket cashes at plus 380, I wouldn't be altogether stunned. So moving right along the card, guys, we've got Francisco Figueiredo, Malcolm Gordon. I am happy to report I have action on this one. And this is a fight that I was happy to target the under 2.5 rounds at minus 150. And I know what you're thinking. Liam, this is, a lightweight fight. Are we sure we want to target the under 2.5 in this spot? I think that it's a great spot to target, and I'll tell you why. Malcolm Gordon, very questionable chin, guys. I know if you listen to other shows, you've heard other people say that this week, that Malcolm Gordon has a questionable chin. I went back and watched all the footage myself. I don't want to take anybody else's word for it. Oh, it's true. Even in fights where he's winning, he seems to get stunned by almost every solid punch that lands on him, especially in his more recent fights. Now, that being said, Malcolm Gordon has power in his hands, right? Malcolm Gordon is kind of an opportunistic finisher in his own right. Granted, was he doing it on a low level? Yes. Was he doing it in a questionable regional scene, TKO in Canada? Yes, he was. However, his last fight was against a pretty credentialed dude who had a lot of respect in Canada. I'm talking about his last regional level fight. This is for Malcolm Gordon. And, he got hurt in that Yanni Sherbatov fight, but he was able to still find the finish and actually hurt Sherbatov as well, hurt him back on the feet. So I think that Malcolm Gordon, I think a bunch of sharp handicappers came in when the line was getting out of hand. But I also think that I'm not willing to get involved in Malcolm Gordon because I've seen his chin cost him before, and I've seen his chin just not look very good in fights that he's won. So I'm going to have to go ahead and target this under 2.5, but I'm also cognizant of the fact that Figueiredo can kind of gas. He's not the greatest fighter in the world. I think that if he takes down Malcolm Gordon into the full guard like he was doing a lot of times in his UFC debut, I think that could be a little questionable for him. And I think that, Malcolm Gordon, for everything else, he does have a jiu-jitsu black belt under a very credentialed black belt, Jorge Brito, I believe is his name. And, he didn't look like it in the fight where he got submitted with the quickness. But, maybe we see an improvement from Malcolm Gordon here. I just want to say under 2.5 for me seems like a very good spot. I went ahead and put down 1.5 units at -150. And I think that that's probably going to come through one way or the other. I like when I can rest easy knowing either not so great fighter could get finished. And I think either of these guys could get finished. We could see a gas out performance from the from the Figueiredo side, or we could see Gordon just get his chin touched and go to sleep. So I think that either way should be a violent spot. I think that there are a lot of violent spots on this card. I think a lot of these fights are going to get finished, main event notwithstanding. I think a lot of the other fights on this card are very likely to get finished. We got a lot of big favorites, and you know what that means. People are expected to finish. So we've got Harley Stone in the comments says, going to be a sick night of fights. Can't wait to see Islam take another step towards the belt. A lot of love for Islam in the chat today. And guys, I can't blame you at all. Islam looks like the goods. His stats and his analytics are effing unbelievable. And I think that guy has a lot of potential, a lot of upside. But don't sleep on my boy, Thiago Moises. I'll tell you, Thiago Moises, everybody thought Alexander Hernandez was going to walk right through him. I tried to tell you guys. Y'all must have forgot. Thiago Moises get better every time he comes out. So I expect the best product from Thiago Moises, and it's probably not going to be enough. So Harley, you're probably going to get exactly what you're looking for, buddy. We got Ryan Haas jumping in, says, great input on an interesting card. Thank you very much, Mr. Haas. We appreciate your feedback, buddy. If anybody else has opinions on these fights, if you've got action either way, hop in that chat. Let us know because we are just about to wrap it up, folks. Also, I want to say before we get to this last fight on the card, which I also have action on, by the way, I want to say like this video if you don't mind. Go ahead and subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. I am here each and every week. I break down the card. A lot of times I'm going to bring on a guest, normally way better handicappers than I am. Also, guys, I can let you know right now, if you're interested in making money long-term betting on sports, check out Delphi Sports. My man, the commish, he has been killing it lately in baseball, up, I believe, over 50 units on the year betting MLB. He also does NBA, NFL. This is a guy you want to follow. He is a sports betting genius. I am a sports betting degenerate. You understand? I want you to find a sports betting genius, Delphi Sports. My man, Nick, the commish, can help you out. So what I expect in the first fight of the night, we have a heavyweight slopper, ladies and gentlemen, and one that I love to see. We've got Rodrigo Nascimento. I am fresh off of cashing a ticket on my man Chris Dawkins, who I have been cashing in his UFC run. Chris Dawkins has made me a chunk of change. I have been otherwise fairly impressed by Rodrigo Nascimento. Not the greatest fighter in the world, but has a process for a heavyweight. willing to back guys onto the cage with offensive forward pressure, collapse his weight into them, take them down, find submissions, and advance in top position. And I think a lot of heavyweights won't be ready for that. I think Alan Badeau, his opponent today, could very well be one of those heavyweights, but I don't know. Alan Badeau hasn't been very active. He's a training partner of the very talented Cyril Gane. I think a lot of times people can get bought into the narrative, well, oh, he trains with him. Sometimes people bring people in to train because they're equal. Sometimes people bring people in to train because they're a body. And I think Alan Badeau might be a good body for them, the right size, the right passion and spirit for fighting, but probably not altogether the best fighter, right? I've seen him get absolutely flatlined in a horrifying manner by Dalcha champion, Dalcha Lungiambula, over in EFC. So he fought in EFC, and then he fought in TKO, neither of which are the most credible regional scenes. If you look at the disqualification win that he had against, I want to say the gentleman's name was Todd Stout in Canada, he actually got drubbed that fight. He got taken down in almost every round, if not every round. He got pummeled from the top position and eventually was submitted by a not altogether clean-looking rear naked choke. I think that this is a setup fight. I think that this is a soft landing for Rodrigo Nascimento. However, when you see a fight at heavyweight, right? Heavyweight fights tend not to have minus 400 favorites. Can anybody think why? It's because there's more variance at this weight class. One weird punch and somebody goes to sleep, right? And I think that the concern I would have laying the chalk minus 400 on Rodrigo Nascimento is that Rodrigo, he just got knocked out in his last fight. That could affect his confidence. That could affect his willingness to come inside. Badeau could have made some improvements, right? I think that the better and smarter way to target this is that somebody is going to get finished. I think that if we have one guy who just was knocked out in his last fight and could easily be knocked out again, and then we have another guy who has no known strengths on the ground. People say no known weaknesses. He has no known strengths on the ground. He gets his guard passed. He doesn't get up that well. He gets submitted. I can't say many good things about Alan Badeau's ground game from what I've seen so far on tape. And so I feel like the way I'm targeting this fight, under 1.5 rounds, 1.45 units at minus 145. So I've got 2 bets on 2 unders, the first 2 fights of the night. I'm expecting violence, folks. I think that the UFC matched up a fight card where storylines, people are interested. What can we offer people on a Saturday night? And they're offering it to hardcore fight fans, guys. So what do you think? Violence. They are bringing us some violence. I think that the UFC has a violent offering this weekend. I think that we are going to see an above average number of finishes. Shout out to my man Mike's MMA picks. Man, that guy said it, and I read it on Twitter right before I came on. I was like, Mike is a genius. That's exactly how I feel. I think almost every fight on this card could be finished. I think that the main event is maybe the least likely, especially because there's 5 rounds to work. We've seen a lot of times people pace themselves for a 5-round contest, but we got 11 fights on the card. We've got a very good number of heavy favorites, and that means finishes in my eyes. Big discrepancies in the money lines. Normally you see a UFC card and you're impressed by how closely matched the lines are, minus 110, plus 130, right, on cage fights. Now we're seeing a lot of big money line favorites. I think we're going to see a lot of finishes. I think we're going to see a lot of mismatches. And I think we're going to see a lot of fun violence. I think if the dogs get rolling tonight, people are going to go wild because I think there's a lot of parlays on the event tonight. I would think that that's how people are targeting this. And so Vegas is going to be hoping just one person drops it off. Just one person slips on the banana peel. And so be careful if you're parlaying. Try and stick to 2 and 3 legs. Don't be going much more than that unless you're going on a small wager, because you just don't want to waste bankroll on something so unlikely. But guys, I wish you all the very best of luck. It is each and every week the good guys, that's us, versus the bookies. And you know that we're coming at him again this week, a lighter slate of action on a lighter UFC card. We're recouping from that Conor McGregor fight week, from the Dustin Poirier fight week. If you guys want to see my thoughts on those fights, it is available on my channel, so you can go back and look. I put up a video with some of my thoughts on the O'Malley stoppage, by example. I put up my thoughts on, Conor McGregor's future and what that fight had meant for him and his legacy. So we touched a bunch of topics in the recap. Also, I can tell you this. We'll be back next week. I already have an amazing guest lined up. I can't wait to share that. If you're interested, check it out by following me on Twitter. I will announce the guest then. And it's going to be a good one, guys. We got a plus EV handicapper, a lot of knowledge, a wrestler like myself who's got a lot of strong opinions on this card. And so it should be good fun. I wish you all the best of luck tonight, and I can't wait to see you all next week. Until next time, this has been Liam Heslin with another episode of Liam Picks Fights. Cheers. God bless y'all.